Ukrainian troops on X responded to Marjorie Taylor Greene's post, inviting her to take a tour of the front lines. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has come to be affectionately known as Moscow Marjorie, has been an unabashed supporter of Russia's and an unapologetic non-sympathizer of Ukraine's. As part of her most recent opposition to U.S. funding for Ukraine, Greene posted on X saying, quote, "In most countries who are under attack, bars and restaurants shut down. While Americans struggle and can barely pay their bills, small businesses shut down and prices soar, Ukraine is booming. Mike Johnson's neocon foreign war spending bill is yet another betrayal of America." The Georgian Legion, which is a Ukrainian fighting force, responded to Greene saying, quote, "Come to Ukraine and we will give you an excursion to the front lines." First of all, what has Marjorie done in her capacity as a congresswoman to help struggling Americans and American small businesses? Well, she voted against the bill that reauthorized the National Marrow Donor Program, which helps thousands of people diagnosed with leukemia and other diseases. Her reason for voting against the bill was, quote, "Nothing in this bill prevents the funding of aborted fetal tissue by taxpayers." The bill had nothing to do with fetal tissue. More recently, she voted against over $9 million in federal funding for her district, but she still is trying to take credit for her district having received those funds. The money went to things like an airport expansion, a water treatment facility, and other infrastructure projects. She also opposes abortion in all cases without exception. She wants school children to receive firearm training. She wants Trump to be unimpeached. She wants to pass a bill that would create a national sales tax, a burden that the American middle class would have to bear while supporting tax cuts to the ultra-wealthy and big corporations. She wants to raise the retirement age to 70, and she wants to convert Medicare to a means-tested voucher program.
Instead of making the wealthy pay their fair share, some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. I'm not saying it's a majority. Let me give you, anybody who doubts it, contact my office. I'll give you a copy. I'll give you a copy of the proposal. That means Congress doesn't vote. Well, I'm glad to see you. No, I tell you, I enjoy conversion.
She's floated the idea of secession, and she said, quote, "The only way you get your freedom back is it's earned with the price of blood." So perhaps Marjorie Taylor Greene, despite what she would like you to think, doesn't have the interests of everyday Americans in mind when she tweets about how well Ukraine is doing right now. And to be clear, her point with the tweet is that Ukraine is doing fine enough to not have their entire economy collapse as they're being actively invaded by a foreign nation, so they don't need our money. It's as if she thinks that unless the entire country has been entirely turned to rubble, they're doing fine. I guess she's not really one for long-term thinking. But it's nothing new to suggest or believe that Greene, for all of her patriotic posturing, is actually a Russian agent. The Russians sure seem to love her. Even the New York Post put a picture of her in a Russian hat on their cover. The Midas Touch network also pointed to a segment from Russian state television with the anchor saying, quote, "Marjorie Taylor Greene, you've just shown is a beauty. She is one of a few members of the U.S. Congress who is trying to look like a person in an old-fashioned sense of the word. She is a blonde who wears white coats with a fur collar. She is demonstratively heterosexual." I'm going to assume that something was lost in translation there, but either way, it's very clear that the Russians are fans of Marjorie's, and why wouldn't they be? Why wouldn't they love the blonde, demonstratively heterosexual American woman who is trying to block funding for the country that the Russians are trying to take over by force? I, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, have been fortunate enough to have been born and raised in this country, so neither of us have ever lived in a nation that was actively under attack for months or years on end. I don't presume to know what it's like to live under those types of conditions, but I do know that it's very easy to sit in your comfortable air-conditioned home and judge people on the other side of the world whose entire homeland, their entire way of life, their entire bloodline They're all facing the worst kind of uncertainty. I don't need to go to the front lines of Ukraine to know that things there are not fine right now. I would never imagine trying to make that point to anyone, let alone trying to convince an entire nation of people of that. It's a selfish and dangerous thing to minimize and then capitalize on the lives and lands of strangers. I will say this, though, about Marjorie Taylor Greene: at least she's consistent. She's consistent in her support of large armies invading nations of people with the express intent of taking their land. A lot of people somehow support both Ukraine and Israel, and I don't really understand how they can find fault with one invading army and not the other, but Marjorie Taylor Greene, she is not playing any of those games, and good for her. All right, that's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and check out my podcast, Modern Context. Thanks.